Good evening. Welcome to the Cunningham Center at Columbus State University. And to our friends watching on the internet, welcome to All on Georgia Muskogee. I'm Richard Hyatt. A month ago, I joined this new wave in news, leaving the Ledger-Enquirer after 44 years. I'm now the editorial director of All on Georgia Muskogee. And that's an alternative to traditions. It's using a multimedia platform to report and deliver local news. So I hope you'll visit us. We've had almost 400,000 visitors in our first 30 days. So we're proud of that and we're grateful for that. My address, I have to give a plug to that, is www.muskogee.allongeorgia.com. If you want to get out your pencils, I'll do it again. www.muskogee.allongeorgia.com. So last night, we were in this same room for a forum that brought the 4 candidates for sheriff of Muskogee County to your screens and to this room. And tonight we welcome representatives of the yes and no on the county's property tax freeze. Two groups of civic-minded citizens find themselves at odds. Neighbors are disagreeing, old friends are bickering, people on Facebook are defriending others for things they might say. But this is not a partisan fight. It's not a generational war. It's two groups composed of good people who disagree. Thaw the Freeze wants to eliminate the freeze. Representing that point of view this evening will be Cedric Hill and Brian Anderson. Presenting the stance that want to keep the freeze will be Mary Sue Pollies and Biff Hayden. Each group has a very interesting website and each one has a Facebook page. You can learn far more than you want to know by visiting these sites. And before you make up your mind, I encourage you to spend some time reading and studying both of these sites. The ballot on the question on the ballot sounds pretty simple. Shall the act be approved which eliminates the current base year assessed value homestead exemption for purposes of Muskogee County School and consolidated city government ad valorem taxes for homestead property acquired after January 1st, 2017. Whoever wrote it didn't leave any place for breathing, that's for sure. The words are simple, but the issue is not. For those of you outside of Columbus who may be joining us on the internet, I'll share a brief history of an issue that has hovered over this community for 35 years. Early in the 1980s, many people in the community were dissatisfied with local assessments. A grassroots movement led by the late attorney Vince McCauley started a discussion that finally made it onto the ballot in 1982. A local constitutional amendment passed handily. It froze home assessments at the value where they were on January 1st, 1983. It was very calm until Frank Martin came along. He was a mayor in 1991, and joined by some powerful leaders of the community, the freeze was taken to the polls in 1991. Martin's supporters were disappointed, however. Columbus probably voted with its pocketbooks and upheld the freeze by a huge margin. 81% of the voters said keep the freeze. This time it is Mayor Teresa Tomlinson who stepped out front. She proposed not removing the freeze, but thawing the freeze. Many of you have already gone to the polls during early voting, and the final decision comes on November 8th. Tonight we're going to hear from both sides, and the forum will begin with both sides having 5 minutes to present their case. Speakers are reminded to keep their eyes on timekeeper Austin Teflinsky here in the front row, and he'll be signaling them when they have 30 seconds left. That portion of the program will be followed by 5 questions that I will pose to both sides. Participants have 2 minutes to answer each question. At the close of the night, each side will have the opportunity to give closing remarks. Once again, they'll be given 5 minutes each. As we begin, I remind the people on the podium and those in our audience to be respectful and civil, and don't act like you're running for president. So now we'll hear our opening remarks. Beforehand, we flipped coins to decide the order of speakers, and our first speaker tonight will be Cedric Hill of Thaw the Freeze. Mr. Hill?
Okay, thank you, Richard. Are you able to hear me okay? I need to pick it up, okay. Okay. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Richard, for the forum this evening, and thank you all who are here. I certainly appreciate the perspective that you open up with is in respect to an understanding of where we are as a community. I wholeheartedly agree with being disagreeable, but at the same time very civil in that we can bring about the appropriate understanding that we would each have as it relates to where we feel like we are as a community. I'm originally from Columbus, born and raised here, and has been in family business here practically all of my life. And my perspective is probably a little bit different than some, but in a lot of respects, maybe similar in a lot of respects to others. Columbus has always been near and dear to me, and it's always been a place that I always would look to be as where I would retire and be comfortable and have a comfortable and a great living. And sometimes if you kind of sort of stay in that posture, stay in that mode, you'll have a tendency to kind of sort of feel like you want to just stay as you are. And I think in a lot of respects, some of the folks that I've come up with over the years is kind of sort of felt like, number one, Columbus would be a place that would really never grow, never expand, never hits horizons. And then oftentimes I think about when you look at downtown Columbus, Georgia right now, I can remember when you would go to Columbus, Georgia at 6 or 7 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and there would be absolutely nothing there. But when you go downtown on Sunday or Saturday evenings now at midnight, you can technically walk the streets and it's full. So my perspective on this is what's necessary for us to advance this community, continue to grow this community, is that what we've got to do is look back at our past, look at things that we may have done then that was beneficial at that time, but not productive for us now. I think this is just a beginning process of us being able to begin a process of pushing forward that we can see Columbus grow from net zero job growth at this particular point, and where people are encouraged not to live in the city limits because of our current tax structure. The thing that I'm a little leery about is that the approach that's being taken is people are being made to feel afraid of that this is going to take their home away from them. So in my house, we like to keep it simple. So we keep it simple by simply saying, if you currently have the freeze, this voting, as we believe, voting yes for this, does not affect you. It's not going to take your home. Nobody's going to put you out of your house. So if you currently have the freeze, you'll keep the freeze. If you go forth in this and it passes, you'll still keep the freeze as it currently stands. If for some reason we go through this and there's some kind of a lawsuit or it's rendered unconstitutional, however those arguments may go, it still will keep those folks protected in where they are. The challenge that we have is you've got 75% of the homeowners in Columbus that's footing the bill for another 25% that's not in a fair tax system. That's my belief fundamentally. In order for us to grow, I've got 2 children, I may have already said that, but I've got 2 children, 26 and 24, that are really at the height of their educational career. I love to think that when they get ready to find their jobs, find their careers, establish their families, that Columbus, Georgia would be high on that list. That's why I encourage those of us that will be voting on November the 8th to vote the thought of freeze that Columbus can continue to advance and grow to be the community that we believe that it can be. Thank you.
This is Mary Sue Polly's.
Yes. Okay, we're delighted to be here. First of all, every one of you who's bought a house in Muskogee County and filed for homestead, you have the freeze. First thing I learned is that some people think, I don't have the freeze because I just bought my house. No, everybody who's bought a house, it applies to every home buyer. And the Supreme Court agreed that it applies to every home buyer equally, because you're frozen, the value of your home for tax purposes is frozen at the price you paid for it. Now, what we're being asked to vote on next Tuesday, well, November the 8th, is whether or not we're going to approve, Richard read the ballot question, whether or not we're going to approve this bill, this act, House Bill 1104. And there are several things that it does. First of all, Richard mentioned that our tax freeze rests on the authority of a local constitutional amendment. You cannot thaw a local constitutional amendment. The Constitution clearly lays out that when you have a local constitutional amendment, and the current Constitution of Georgia does not allow any local amendments, any new ones. We have it because they were allowed back in 1982 when our tax freeze was created. And by local, we mean it applies just to Muskogee County only. Back then, they let counties create those local amendments. Well, this bill repeals the local constitutional amendment, and the people are not being told that. The people are being told that it is being retired. No, the words are being very carefully parsed. The first sentence of this act says, to revise the homestead exemption. They are revising the exemption. The exemption is the freeze that we all have. To revise the exemption for Muskogee County, and listen to these words. You don't have to be a lawyer, you just have to know English, and we've all studied English for 12 years or more. Formally provided for by a local constitutional amendment. They did try to scour the words repeal out, I believe, but 4 times, 1 time on page 1, 3 times on page 2, you all have this in your seats, in your packets. If it hasn't been passed down, you all have it. First thing in your packet, we want everybody to see what you are being asked to approve if you vote yes, and what you will be approving if you vote yes. So 4 times, with my little markings, I've pointed them out for you. The local constitutional amendment that makes your tax freeze constitutional is being repealed. It is spoken of in the past tense. That's what English students know. Formally provided for is the past tense. It's 3 times on page 2 that you'll find that same kind of wording. Let me be sure it's page 2. Yep, page 2. And then on line 14, and line 114, in this act that you're being asked to vote yes on, if you want to thaw, it says it will automatically repeal every law in conflict with this law. Now, we've been told by the mayor that that doesn't mean anything, that it's just boilerplate language, that it's legalese and means nothing. Folks, it means exactly what the English words say. We are being asked, this act will repeal every law in conflict with this law. Once we were told by the mayor, a group was told, that that just means it repeals all prior iterations of this act. No, it does not. They never became law. The law that is significant to every homeowner that conflicts with this act is the freeze law that you have right now. And why does it conflict? Because it goes to every single buyer equally. This takes the freeze, this that you're voting on, takes the freeze away from new buyers. But it says you can keep your freeze. However, the local amendment that makes our freeze now constitutional will have been repealed. This is the Supreme Court decision. I didn't make a copy of every one of these, but there are several over here on the table. If you want a copy of it, we want you to have it. This was in, Richard gave a history, but he neglected to say, because he didn't have enough time, Richard, that in 2000, a group of citizens attacked, well, I wouldn't say attacked, they challenged the freeze in court. And in 2003, the Supreme Court of Georgia rendered their decision and ruled that the freeze that we have now is constitutional for two main reasons. First, it rests on the authority, I'm about to run out of time, it rests on the authority of that local constitutional amendment that you're being asked to repeal. And the second reason is because it goes to everybody equally, and this takes it away from all new buyers. The two things, friends, that the Supreme Court said makes the freeze you have now constitutional go away with the approval of House Bill 1104. Troutman and Sanders was hired by Atlanta to give advice. They gave advice in this package. You can pick up one over there. And they told the city to add a non-severability clause, which they did not add, and the letter to Josh McCoon from the Attorney General you have in your laps. And he gave his opinion.
Thank you, Mary Sue. I thought for a moment that you were going to diagram those sentences.
You know, I started to do it.
But I want to remind everyone, too, here in the audience and who's watching the live stream on the internet, that this is live tonight, but it will be archived on the website and available for people to view at their leisure after tomorrow. And so go back and watch yourselves or encourage others to watch so they can have the benefit of what we hear tonight. The next segment of the program is some questions and answers. And I've got a few to ask, and we'll see, and each person will have, or each side will have 2 minutes to answer. It's been suggested that the freeze is affecting our community's growth. Yet all around us, we see restaurants and hotels being built along with many other businesses. So is the freeze hurting us or not? Brian or Cedric?
Thank you, Richard. The data, and the reason I would suggest that it has been emotional, and I think all of us have gotten caught up in that, and we have to catch ourselves. I'd rather go back and look at the data, which is what I'm charged to do in my day job. If you look at population growth, it's we're the 59th out of 60 southeastern MSAs, meaning the regional counties that make that up, have grown at 22% over 40 years, versus the other parts of the Southeast have grown at 117%. So we're growing less than what's considered organic growth. Our job growth has been net zero negative since 2000. Yes, TSYS has grown, Synovus has grown, Pratt & Whitney. Individual companies have had growth, but we haven't had companies come into the community at the rate everybody else has. So our job growth has been behind the other communities we're competing against. New home permits for the last 5 years have been the slowest, actually declining year after year. So those of you that are watching at home will watch this in archive. I would just encourage you to go to thawthefreeze.com, look at all the information. Don't look at parsed words. Don't look at out-of-context statements from non-lawyers. Look at the data that says we have a growth and vitality issue. We've had 2 major studies that have nothing to do with the thaws conducted in the last 18 months. One was during the Regional Prosperity Initiative, which is providing our strategic plan. The other was by the Matrix Design Group, looking at the benefits or the issues facing the drawdown at Fort Benning. Both studies have shown that this tax issue or the lack of growth, whichever way you parse it, has been the major problem tied to our growth issues. So it's a vote for status quo or a vote for growth. That's really what we're looking at here.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the background. I would simply say that when you look at economic growth and population growth, there are some very unique elements that you can look at. The Chamber of Commerce in its economic development demographics shows that between 2010 and 2013, Muskogee County actually grew by 6.8%, and Georgia grew by 3.1%. When you look at population growth in our area, it's more of a metropolitan statistical growth. Muskogee County is running out of land. We have to grow up. We really can't grow out. We can do some infield development. So you look around, Russell County's growth is 5%. It's 9th in the nation, tops in Alabama, and that was about 2.5, 3 years ago. If you look at Lee County is now part of our MSA. Their growth is staggering with automotive manufacturing and supplies. MSA is growing.
Thank you. I went out on Facebook and asked people to submit some questions, and you'll have no doubt that this one came from a real estate agent. For homeowners who are denied lower assessments when their values dropped because frozen means frozen, can they add or remove a name from the deed to trigger a transfer so they can stop overpaying? I'll start on this side.
I don't know about changing name on a deed. You know, I think you'd have to ask Ms. Lula Huff, the tax commissioner, that question. I do know that when the house, you know, you didn't ask about inheritance, so I'm not certain about that. But I do think about these people. You know, the only homeowners in this county who are not benefiting now from the tax freeze are those who bought during the real estate bubble. All of our adult life, property values have gone up until the recent crash. And those who bought during that bubble, before the bubble burst, they are now upside down on the value of their home, and they are frozen at that property tax and their tax rate, and they're the only ones not benefiting from the freeze at this point. Those values are recovering. I think they've recovered a good bit of the percentage back up to what they paid for their houses. But I do want to say that if the goal of this enterprise had been to help people, help homeowners, we could certainly have arrived at some plan whereby they could forego their homestead exemption. Now, I've been told the city attorney now does not opine that way. However, there is no law that requires anybody file for homestead at all. And if they were able to forego all of their exemptions, then that would include the freeze. I know that they can't just let the freeze go, but if they were able to get out of homestead entirely, then that would simply be an opinion because nobody else is affected except Muskogee County by our tax freeze. So, but whether or not transferring, that's a question for Lula Huff.
I second that. I'm not a tax assessor, so I don't know how it affects the current law as far as adding or taking away. What I'll say is, yes, Biff, you're exactly right. There's moments in time, there's been some growth. You can pull a county or two. If you look at the whole region, 6-county region, over 40 years, there has not been growth at the rate of everybody else. It's less than 1% a year. Those values, I'm looking for a home. I look at real estate every night online, and I see these folks that bought homes in 04, 05, 08, and they paid $250 or $300,000 or $150. They're now trying to sell them for $20, $30, $40,000 less than that. So a healthy economy, healthy real estate transactions, healthy growth, all of that helps everyone benefit. You're right. There's folks that are in the 2006 to 2010 time frame that bought at the high point. They're trapped. That's the problem also with an absolute freeze. It doesn't protect you in the downturn. I've benefited from that up in North Georgia. My taxes went down 4 years in a row because the economy was bad. Our digest went down, the rate was stayed the same, so my taxes went down. So how it changes as far as transfers, I don't know, but I do know that a healthy system, keeping the freeze for those who have it, which is the right thing to do, and allowing a new market system to go forward helps everybody move forward, and it provides for growth and vitality.
Well, moments ago, Brian Anderson mentioned the emotions, and the emotions are very real about this issue. And every day on Facebook, I see two dear friends of mine picking at each other just constantly. And they haven't stopped, and I'm not sure they'll stop even after the election. But from your perspective and from your side of the issue, please describe why this is such a heart-tugging issue.
Well, I kind of go back to what I said initially. When you, and I did, when you come from this community and you kind of sort of had your perspective and projections of how things were going as it relates to you personally in your past, this is really not a blanket issue. So in a lot of respects, some of the emotion, I think, is coming from the fact that the intention here is that it's a little bit complicated from the perspective of me being here all my life, owning my home for a certain amount of time, and then there being potentially almost like a fear tactic that says to me that I'm potentially going to lose the home that I'm in. Not only am I not going to lose it, this current situation, if I'm struggling with the house that I'm in, this that we're talking about has nothing to do with that. It's something else going on in my life that would have me challenged by my current status of which I'm living. But I can understand the safety that I'm in as it relates to being able to stay in Thalta Freeze when this goes forward. The challenge that we have is when we're looking at newcomers. As I said before, when I look at the fact that my children potentially will be establishing families and they come here right now from where they sit, it's more encouraging for them to live outside of Muskogee County than to come in to try and offset something that they had nothing to do with that was established 30 plus years ago. That's the simplicity it is as it relates to me. Now, the emotion comes from the perspective of when you tell a person, if I go to you and tell you that you're about to lose your home, that brings about a certain emotion. And that's not the case here. I think that's where a lot of that's coming from.
Okay, I think the emotion on the no side is coming from the fact that the people aren't being told the whole story. When you're being promised that you will keep your freeze by people who will not have the authority to keep that promise if and when it goes to court, and every adult in this community understands that. These fine gentlemen do not have the power to keep the promise they've made here tonight if this new plan goes to court. And there's every reason to believe it will go to court just as the one we have now went to court. It will open up a whole new court challenge for a new plan. We know we are not dumb. We know that the mayor will not have the power to keep that promise. And it makes you mad. It makes you mad that people are telling you something that you've got enough sense to understand the truth of. And then it is people's homes on the line, and some people will be taxed out of their homes.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. Those individuals that are elderly, that are on a single form of income, if this goes to court, and it in all probability will, and if it's ruled against, which the attorneys that have looked at it have said it probably will, are going to face an unrealistic tax burden, and it doesn't have to be.
Well, we've got some time. We'll open it up. Go ahead. We're going to.
I will not, I just want to make one quick comment. I will not challenge Mary Sue. I'm going to keep my comments to be, what I can prove. And I think she is very confident and assured in what she believes, and I trust that and respect that. But let me say one quick thing. This is not the mayor's legislation, even though she's pushed for it. She might have even written the first rep, I don't know. I know for a fact that this went through the city council, the school board, the House committee, the Senate committee, the full legislature, and invalidated by the legislative council, which are the chief lawyers who are supposed to keep the General Assembly out of court. Now, yes, are they got right all the time? Can it be challenged? Of course it can be challenged. But if you can't have confidence that the system is supposed to protect those things, what do we have confidence in? I would say this also, if I was mayor or council, that if I had a real thought that it was going to go away for anybody that is a senior citizen or who has paid their fair share, I would simply put in place a stronger homestead, or in some cases, like we did in North Georgia, we waived all property taxes for age 65 and older. That's a way to fix it. And I would propose that and ask City Council to move on that. Whether it passes or not, that's something that ought to be looked at.
Okay, just a brief, this is not something Mary Sue just feels like. The Attorney General of Georgia wrote 8 days to one of our senators, 8 days before the final vote. This will create such a murky legal situation that it will end up in the court system. All of you have a copy of this letter. It will end up in the court system, and they will sort it out, more or less is paraphrasing what he said. And he said his office could not assure you that this thing we're voting on is constitutional. Everybody check that out. Troutman and Sanders, hired by the city, letter written to the city attorney, said in case a court disagrees with what you're doing because there is no legal precedent for what you are doing, Troutman and Sanders told them repeatedly there is no legal precedent for this. It's in this packet that you may pick up over here. They said we have not found a case in Georgia or in any other state where this has been done. And then in this letter to the city attorney, they said, in case a court disagrees with what you're doing, put a non-severability clause in, meaning if the court throws it out, we'll go back to what we had. They did not put the non-severability clause in. You can check it out by checking out this non-severability clause saying it would go back. They chose not to do that.
Just want to remind viewers that this will be shown on www.muskogee.allongeorgia.com for the coming days, and you may also go to that site and watch the forum on the sheriff's race, which was up there last night, and it'll be up there for days to come as well. So much of what we're talking about tonight comes down to one word, and that's trust. And so I wonder, what assurance do property owners have that the millage rate will decrease and stay down? You want to start over here?
The same assurance that we have right now. And again, I've often said, being in politics a long time, we have to hold our elected officials accountable. If they're not doing their job, they need to be changed. The second thing that would help is House Bill 1187, passed by Governor Barnes, which states now, in the last, I think, 8 years it's been now, 8 years, 9 years, that if a county has a growth in its digest, which creates any revenue over the year prior, they have to hold 3 tax hearings or roll back the millage rate. And I've seen county after county not have to face citizens like you. They don't want to have that conversation, so they have been pressured. It has worked like it's supposed to. So you have to be able to change your politicians or elected officials if they're not doing their job. You have to let the system, which is House Bill 1187, which now makes them be accountable to you, the citizen. Those checks are in place. I got to say one quick thing. Again, back to, I could pull a letter from August 2015 that was speaking to a previous rewrite. It has nothing about what was on the current bill, so that's not correct. No legal precedent. There are very few legal precedents in Georgia around a variety of topics. The Supreme Court is the final arbiter. So unless it's been litigated before, there's not legal precedent. So it'll have to be looked at fresh if it is challenged in court. And again, the Legislative Council are the chief lawyers for the General Assembly. They don't like being overturned. They don't like to have laws passed that are going to be challenged in the courts and lose. So they have ruled, and they put in the language that is there. Non-severability was not needed because there's not a repeal.
I've got to answer that. I do need to answer that. On February 20th, this article from the Ledger Enquirer gives the wording from Legislative Council, and instead of nameless legislative councils, it says the name. All right, the Troutman Sanders lawyer was there, the city attorney Clifton Fay was there in a meeting in Atlanta where they came up with the wording for the ballot. His assistant, Lucy Sheftal, was there, and House General Counsel Wayne Allen came up with this wording for the ballot. Folks, this article is available online. We can post it on our website as well. In the final ballot wording, this was 1 month before the legislators voted, it said, shall the act be approved so as to repeal the current local constitutional amendment. This was changed. That wording was changed after Legislative Counsel Wayne Allen, we've got his name, approved it. It was changed within 1 month before the legislators voted on it. We'd like to know who changed it and why. Richard, that's a good investigation for you. And there's no promise of a millage rate.
Yeah, let me go back to the question of millage rate. It's never been stated officially. Any change in the future tax digest, and by the way, repeal of this is a tax increase. Whether it's a thaw or a repeal, it's a tax increase. The Tax Foundation in 2012 did a special study nationally. They looked at 26 communities. Any tax increase results in negative growth for years to come, and it varies in terms of the number of years. So to repeal it means we're going to live with higher taxes for a longer period of time and struggle with the outcome.
One last question in this segment. What assurance do property owners have that their properties will be fairly valuated when the city decides it's worth more?
That appeal process that everybody has to go down there and fight City Hall with.
every piece of property is subject to an annual appraisal. If you don't know, the city recently invested some amount of money in upgrading its electronic IT systems, and with it, Google Earth. That allows them to take an aerial photograph of your property, and if they see an expansion of your property that's not been properly documented through the permit process, they come out and inspect and revise your property value. Every time you do an appraised increase, it's subject to appraised value increase, and your tax is going to go up. It's just a never-ending process of every year increased taxes are a possibility and a probability.
Taxes do go up, values go up, cost of service provision goes up. It's amazing to me that right now that I'm paying $1,600 a year for Cablevision and internet, and yet there are many that don't pay that for getting 24/7 fire protection, 24/7 police protection. I've heard the argument my sales taxes pay for that. That's not true. Everybody else pays sales taxes too. So if your value of your house is going up, that means the economy's okay. Now to keep it in check, again, the state has to have an audit that makes sure that a local digest stays in the right bandwidth. It can't get too low versus the state's figures and audits. It can't get too high. But we have to hold our elected officials primarily accountable, providing the services that lowest cost provided are possible. That's been brought up. Trust? I don't think any of us trust our government. I mean, look at what we've been dealing with for the last year and a half on the national stage. But if you look at the numbers, and I challenge everybody watching, look at the numbers. Our cost of services come to us at a cost of $1,400 a year for everything we get. All the great services. Savannah's $2,000, Augusta's $1,800. So places we compare against, we have a very good cost. I would not say that to say we agree with every decision that council has brought. I don't. I was there 3.5 hours Monday night, as many of you were. But the question is, how do we get the best cost of services provided at the lowest rate possible? That's what we all desire.
The next thing we're going to do, and I'll pause a little bit here so that both sides can be thinking about it, but I want to invite your side to ask this side a question, and you guys can ask them a question.
Okay.
To be thinking about what you want to do, but I do want to thank Columbus State University and the Cunningham Center for allowing us to use this facility last night and tonight. They've been gracious hosts and really a big help to us in every way. And we will be doing other live streaming events, and just watch our website, and we'll be informing you about that. But we didn't talk about who would go first, so I'll just, you go first.
We'll be glad to.
All right.
To ask our question.
Ask.
Okay, it's one that's, excuse
I'll
me,
get out of the way.
2 minutes. 2 minutes start, I guess, when they start to answer it, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, this has already been discussed, but it does puzzle me. On September 19th, well, this specific hadn't been discussed, but on September 19th, while speaking to a group at the Board of Realtors building, the mayor and Tyler Townsend, who are two leaders of the Thaw side, admitted that they cannot guarantee that people will be able to keep their tax freeze. A number of people are here tonight in the audience who can verify that, who were present at that meeting. Given that, why does the Thaw campaign continue to declare to citizens all over this town, even given here tonight, having done so tonight, that if you have the freeze, you will keep the freeze, as was declared on this letter that went out citywide? If you have the, and it's on everything they print. If you have the freeze, you will keep it. Given the fact that the mayor said they couldn't guarantee that to that group of realtors, why do you continue to say it?
If it's challenged in court, there's always the chance the Supreme Court will do something. And that's why I offered tonight, I mean, I thought about it for a few weeks and even talked to a couple councilmen, that if it had that effect, even if it passes on November 8th, there ought to be an immediate conversation about how do you freeze or not freeze, how do you eliminate taxes based on senior citizens or certain categories. That can be done. It's done in other parts of the state. But I would say that there's no guarantees in life, period. And I certainly wouldn't. I mean, how many times have you all known two lawyers to agree? It ain't going to happen. But in this case, there was agreement up and down that the intention was to freeze the current group who have it and to allow for a fair market system to go into place January 1st, 2017. That allowance gives the best chance for a modulated tax policy going forward. So I would guarantee that the intention was there. Every governing body that voted on it, including the Legislative Council, including the full House Senate, including the full House, full House and Senate, all agreed that based on what was intended is what was passed. And so given some aberration by the Supreme Court, that's the only way it shouldn't happen the way it's planned.
Okay, would you like to ask a question?
Okay. Our question would be, in our current structure, as it relates to the fact that we've seen zero job growth and we see a welcome stranger taxes not permitting or allowing people to come into Columbus, our question would be respectively, where would we go from here? How do we grow Columbus? How do we become the community that we need to be with a fair system where people would come into Columbus and technically pay their fair share, and we would have an equitable system that would encourage people to live here, to move here, to grow their families here, start their businesses here, and Columbus would be a viable community just like any other place in the nation.
Every day I pick up the paper, just about, there's another business coming. But to call what we have now a welcome stranger tax, when we're being asked to take the freeze away from the newcomers, that's the real welcome stranger tax, in my opinion. We have a benefit we're going to take away from them, and then they will have standing to sue. But to ask us about going forward, the Thaw side completely neglects to understand that we had the fair market value system in the 1970s and 60s and 50s and 40s. It's the only system we ever had prior to 1982, when people overwhelmingly voted to abandon it in favor of the tax freeze. And then in 91, 92, voted over 80% to keep the new system, the freeze. To ask us to go back to the fair market value system is asking us to go back to the 70s and earlier than that.
Yeah, I would add that actually the Chamber has done a good job of helping to grow the economy. If you look at the Blue Cross Blue Shield expansion in Muskogee Technology Park, if you look at them working hand in hand with Pratt & Whitney and existing manufacturing to do some rather significant dollar investments and capital growth in our community. If you look at the recruitment of the call center down on Victory Drive to replace Road America, if you look at the steel plant that they brought into Bradley Park, it takes work and it takes a good sales force. They are, but that's the solution. And then working hand in hand with our biggest employer in the community, that's Fort Benning, to look at ways that we can leverage the defense industries in the future.
It's so impressive to stand up here and look at the material that all these people have at their disposal. I guess you've done this before. The final segment is the closing remarks from both sides of the table. We had a little flip of the coin, and Cedric Hill is going to go next, and then be followed by Mary Sue Pollies.
Well, fundamentally, as I start before, we like to keep it simple in our home, and I like to just keep this simple to you by appealing to you to vote yes to thaw this freeze, primarily because of my fundamental belief, all of my research, all of my findings, and of course all of this can be found on www.thawthefreeze.com, what respectively means simply this: if we are currently under the freeze after the 8th, if this passes, which we believe that it fundamentally will, and we're asking for the vote of this to happen, you'll still be there. You'll still be under the freeze. You'll be protected and you're secure as it relates to that. If after the election transpires, it's a vote of yes, you'll still be there. Lastly, if for some reason, because what happens to us is we've been given this constitutionality that is challenging us in an emotional perspective to be afraid of constitutionality. If for some reason constitutionality enters into this, because realistically I can sue you because I don't like you. So If constitutionality comes into this, and for some reason there's a suit, then what happens is you're still under your current structure. You're still under the freeze currently as you stand right now. So the thing that I like to say is no one is going to take your home away from you. The intention is that people that are coming into this community would pay their fair share, fair market value, and we would be able to begin at that point in time to turn, this is not a fix-all to every problem that we have. It's a whole lot of different directions that you can kind of go with this. This would just be the beginning process of which we will begin to turn the tides on this, and it'll be some time before you actually see any monies that will come from it. That's another thing we want to make sure that you understand too. This is not a microwave. It's going to be, took us a long time to get in this. It's going to take us a long time to get out. And when we begin to do that, then the services that all of us are asking for, whether it's trash or city services, police officers, fire department, all of that, will begin to write that and be equatable to other communities our size as an equatable community in this country. So again, I would say, I urge you to give consideration, find the facts for yourself. I'm talking to you, but look at what I'm saying to you. www.thawthefreeze.com.
You had me excited that I thought you were going to talk about twice a week garbage pickup coming back, but that's another subject for another night. So Mary Sue Polly's.
Yes. Friends, this act, House Bill 1104, includes nothing about lower taxes for anybody. There's no lower millage rate. Newcomers coming to town aren't going to have the taxes lowered. Your children who want to come back and live here, there's nothing anywhere to assure us or even suggest that millage rates are going to be lowered. As far as that bill from, that law from Governor Barnes, I sat on the school board. We did that every single year, and we never reduced the millage rate, and neither has the city. Even though they have to have those 3 hearings, they go right on and keep the millage rate what it is. There is no suggestion whatsoever that millage rate is going down. Well, there may be they may be implying it, but there's no promise, there's no plan for millage rates to go down. It says nothing about better housing or more jobs. It does not lay out any new progressive tax plan. It's for taking us back to what we had in the 70s and earlier, and there's nothing new and progressive about that. It's what they want us to go back to a system that we voted to abandon decades earlier. When we try to figure out the real reasons for what's behind this, given the fact that it puts our 2008, and this is the yellow paper you have in your packet, it puts our 2008 local option sales tax absolutely in jeopardy. Read the background of this sales tax. This sales tax was allowed only because we have a tax freeze, allowed by the state, and because we have consolidation. Those two are prerequisites for this penny sales tax. It is a permanent penny. 70% of it goes for public safety. And if we lose when the freeze goes away, the authority to collect this penny goes away. It brings in $35 million a year, every year. Do they really think that the 7,000 people who are the bottom 25% of the homeowner taxpayers, do they really think that those 7,000 people can make up $35 million? And again, we assume it's for more revenue for the city, but that doesn't make sense because they just said that there won't be any new revenue for decades, way out into that will be true if their promise is true that people get to keep the freeze. But we know that something else is going on. We are not done. If the city needs to raise the valuations of homes in order to raise the county's tax base so that they can increase the level of bonded indebtedness they can incur, then let's tell the people. If they need to abolish the tax freeze in order to make the TADs work, let's explain that to the taxpayers. If redevelopment of public-private projects and partnerships depend on getting a higher tax base, tell the people. As former Mayor Bobby Peters said back in 2002, and his full statement is there in your packet as well, I asked him for permission to share it, and he said we could. And he was documenting the phenomenal growth that had occurred in the 8 years he was mayor with the tax freeze, and he made this powerful statement: homeowners were our partners in each and every project. They maintain the continuity of our neighborhoods and the foundation of our city. Leaving the freeze in place provides them with a little assurance that their lifelong investment will not be placed in jeopardy. If the thaw side wins, House Bill 1104 will become binding law, and it will repeal the constitutional tax freeze you now have. And the only way they can get rid of it is for you to vote it out. I think citizens should be afraid of a government and people in power who are not telling you the whole story. If it becomes law, the stage will be set for new lawsuits, at least two. One about the 2008 penny sales tax that brings in $35 million that City Council has not even discussed contingency plans for how to balance the budget without, and a new one, like a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of what we just voted in. If the vote no side wins, we will keep the freeze exactly as it is now for all current and future homeowners, and this act will go in the trash can, and no new lawsuits can occur because the freeze we have now is settled law. It has been as far as it can go to the Supreme Court of the United States and cannot be challenged again. Don't be misled. Don't be tricked into voting away the homeowner benefit that we've enjoyed for decades. Let's vote no on the last item on the ballot and send this Act 1104 to the trash can where it belongs.
Well, I offer a round of applause to all four of our participants tonight. Brian Anderson, Cedric Hill, Mary Sue Pollies, and Biff Hayden, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for being passionate about your side of the issue. It's very impressive to see that kind of passion and commitment to something coming at the end of the ballot. Many times we skip over those issues at the end, but I don't think people are going to be skipping that portion of the ballot this round. Again, thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us on www.muskogee.allongeorgia.com. I got to get to where I can say that more comfortably. But it is a pleasure for us to have hosted this forum tonight. And thank you again to Columbus State University and the Cunningham Center for being our host. Join us on the website. Join us for this event beginning tomorrow, and join us for replays of the forum on the sheriff's race in Muskogee County. Thank you and good night.